Welcome back to part 2 of Turfgrass. In this video, we're going to look at some of the insect pests and diseases that commonly uh, plague homeowners growing turf. Pests of turf is a very important section because a lot of time homeowners and even professionals, if they don't look close enough, will misdiagnose exactly what the pest problem is. Some of the common pests we're going to look at is common turf caterpillars, the two-line spittlebug, ants, which could be a problem in any lawn, scarab beetles, which are mostly a problem of St. Augustine grass, chinch bugs, also a problem of St. Augustine, hunting billbug, like we mentioned in the last video, that's the insect pest for zoysia, mole crickets, several different species, which can be problems of Bahia grass, and then there's several very important fungal diseases of turf that can cause bad problems, a few viruses, and of course weeds. We always get a lot of questions about weeds and what homeowners can do to control them. The tropical sod webworm can be a problem during the summer, mostly on St. Augustine grass. A lot of times people will notice as they walk through their lawn tiny little brown moths that fly up as they walk through the grass. This is the adult component of a tropical sod webworm. They are very, very small, usually gray-green caterpillars. The easiest way to tell if your lawn has them or not is to look very, very closely at the grass blades. If the size of the grass blades have chewing damage to them, it could very well be a tropical sod webworm. Fall armyworms are not very often turf problems. They can be problems with a wide variety of different crops. They have a very wide host range, but there are certain grasses that they'll feed on. Bahia grass a little bit. They could be a huge problem in Bermuda. So for anybody who has Bermuda lawn, fall armyworm can be a problem. The striped grass looper is another caterpillar that is a potential problem in turf, mostly feeding on Bermuda grass. I've honestly only seen it once. It's a fairly large, fairly long caterpillar, but it can be an occasional problem, mostly with just Bermuda. You rarely see it on any other turf. The two-line spittlebug is a small insect in the order Hemiptera, so it has a piercing, sucking mouth part. The adults are very easy to find. If you're walking through a lawn, they'll fly up, they'll fly around you. They're very small, maybe quarter-inch long at most. They're also called spittlebugs because they'll make the adults will make a spittle-like mass where they lay their eggs in, and then the immature spittlebugs will actually hide in that mass when they're very small. They're not normally a very serious pest of turf, kind of a minor little side note type of pest that people may notice sometimes, but rarely rises to the point where you have to take any kind of action or chemical control. Ants can occasionally become problems in a lawn. Ants never bother the grass. They don't damage the grass or feed on it, but certain ants can be a danger to people, children, pets, people playing in the lawn. Of course, any kind of imported fire ant can bite people and you might have a medical reaction to it. But there's a large number of different ant species that live in Florida, and most of them are not really going to cause any problem. Florida harvester ants just crawl around looking for seeds to feed on. They don't feed on the grass. They don't bite. So a number of the species of ants that live in lawns don't even bite. They're not even going to pose a problem to children or pets playing in the grass. So it's very important that any kind of ants are identified down to species to determine if they're a problem or a potential danger or not before taking any kind of corrective chemical action. Beetle grubs live underground and they feed on grass roots. So technically they are a potential problem, but I spoke with a gentleman who is a commercial pest control company who works with lawns, and I asked him once before how often he actually has to spray for beetle grubs. He said in the last 10 years he's only had to treat one lawn. So even though they're a potential problem, they rarely rise to the point where they're going to actually cause damage to a lawn where they have to be controlled. So it's mostly scarab beetle larvas or grubs that feed underground. And if you go digging in a lawn, you can find them normally, But like I said, they rarely get so numerous that they're going to cause an actual problem in the lawn. In this diagram, you can see what beetle grubs actually look like and the adult beetles that they eventually turn into. Obviously, the smaller the grub, the smaller the beetle. The larger the grub, the larger the eventual adult beetle. Many of these are very, very common insects in our yards. The larger beetles you'll see flying around at night around your porch lights. The smaller ones, June bugs, June beetles, are all scarab beetles, and their grubs all feed on some type of grass roots, and that could potentially be lawn roots. The southern chinch bug is a pest of St. Augustine grass, and it seems like every dead patch in somebody's St. Augustine lawn is blamed on chinch bugs. And you're going to find out when we cover diseases of turf that this isn't always necessarily true. But we do have chinch bugs in Hernando County, and they are potentially very destructive insects. They're also in the order Hemiptera, which means they have a piercing, sucking mouth part. They'll live down amongst the grass blades and runners in St. Augustine lawns. They feed on the runners and the individual grass blades, removing the nutrients and the water from them. So the grass blades are going to turn yellow and then brown, and then grass dies in patches. Chinch bugs prefer it where it's very hot and very dry. So they're going to mostly congregate near a sidewalk, a driveway, a very sunny part of somebody's yard. You see the diagram, the pictures on the right hand side of the slide here. The chinch bug, the immature ones, look similar to the adults, but they can be very different colors. So at different life stages are going to be different colors. But the adult eventually is a very small insect. They're not much larger than a good sized grain of pepper. So you really have to get down there and search for them amongst the grass blades and runners. But you see the picture on the right hand side of what an adult looks like. If you're scouting through a St. Augustine lawn, there's several other insects that can look familiar or similar to the chinch bug. You really need a hand lens or a microscope to be able to accurately tell the difference. So on the left here you see a southern chinch bug. In the center is a false chinch bug, which looks similar, but it looks different. It's definitely not the southern chinch bug that's damaging the St. Augustine lawns. On the far right hand side here you see a big-eyed bug, which in real life is pretty much the same size as an adult southern chinch bug, but big-eye bugs are very beneficial. They feed on chinch bugs and other pests in your lawn, so you want to be very careful that you correctly identify the insects that you actually see in your lawn before you start taking any kind of control methods. The hunting bill bug is a weevil that is a pest on zoysia lawns. Honestly, I've never seen one before. And unless you go out and deal with a lot of zoysia lawns, you'll probably never see one also. The only type of turf they feed on is zoysia, and since we have so few zoysia lawns in the county, I've rarely encountered or been asked to answer any questions or diagnose problems with zoysia. So if you're looking at a zoysia lawn, this is the insect pest that could be in there feeding on the grass and damaging it. But if you're not looking at a zoysia lawn, you're never going to run across a hunting bill bug. Mole crickets can be a pest of Bahia lawns. What happens is the mole crickets will tunnel underneath the grass plants, uproot the plants, dry out the roots. Most of the damage occurs during the summer when there's large numbers of mole crickets out. Mole crickets aren't normally a major pest of Bahia grass. Anybody with a Bahia lawn, if you go out in the middle of summer at night with a flashlight, look around your lawn, or go outside by your front porch lights or lights you might have around your patio or pool, you will find mole crickets, but most residential lawns don't have enough mole crickets to really rise to the level of being a serious pest. So therefore, we rarely see a problem with mole crickets where they have to actually be chemically controlled. Here in Florida, we have several different species of mole crickets. Some of them are invasive. They came here from South and Central America. Other ones are native to the United States, but they all basically do the same damage. Mole crickets can be a large problem for pastures, people who are raising cattle on Bahia grass, but rarely are they a problem for homeowners with a residential Bahia lawn. There are several different diseases that affect lawns. This varies by the type of lawn that you're growing. It can be anything from mushrooms, which pop up in lawns, to other parasitic fungi that actually feed on the grass blades, the grass roots, and damage the lawn. Like I mentioned earlier, Bahia grass generally has no diseases that are a problem, but St. Augustine does, Zoysia does, and Bermuda do. Different species of fungi can be a problem, especially during the warm summer months when the conditions are right for fungal growth. It's very humid, very wet, very rainy. This problem is compounded by people who irrigate their lawn in the evening or in the middle of the night because that way their lawn is sitting there wet overnight, which really encourages fungal growth. You see the picture on the bottom left-hand side here. That's gray leaf spot on St. Augustine grass. It's a very common problem in St. Augustine lawns during the summer. If you go out there and look closely, you're going to see it, but it usually doesn't become so widespread that it actually starts killing large patches of the lawn. It's more of a minor problem that makes part of the lawn look a little bit unsightly. Large patch is a fungal disease that you may run across reading EDIS documents, especially about turf. I've never seen it be a problem in Hernando County before, although theoretically it could. It's mostly a problem during the spring and fall in North Florida, and then winter and spring in South Florida, but it's rarely a problem here in Central Florida. You can reduce the disease outbreaks and the chance of having an outbreak by being very careful with how much nitrogen fertilizer you add and being very careful on the irrigation. Too much water is going to really enhance this disease problem. Zoysia grass can be very susceptible to this, but because we have so little zoysia being grown in Hernando County, we very, very rarely see it. But another fungal disease that I see it almost on a weekly basis in lawns, is called take-all root rot. This is a very important disease that primarily affects St. Augustine lawns because what happens is the fungus will affect the roots of the St. Augustine grass, the roots will die, the leaves will turn yellow and then brown, and you end up with large dead patches, which looks very, very similar to the kind of damage that southern chinch bugs might do to a lawn. So what happens a lot is people will look at a dead spot in their lawn and assume it's chinch bugs, when in reality it's take-all root rot. Technically, all different turf grasses are susceptible, although we see it much, much more widespread on St. Augustine lawns here in Hernando County. What makes this disease bad is you could treat it with fungicides, and that will help the symptoms subside, but once you have this disease in your lawn, it will never go away. So even if your lawn dies, you have to tear it up and resod. The fungus is still in the soil and will still continue to be a problem long term. There's nothing that will get it out of the soil or off of the property. So what really makes this disease bad is when your lawn becomes stressed. Some of the things that can cause stress in a lawn is mowing at the wrong height. Basically, cutting it short is very stressful for St. Augustine grass. Fertilizing it too heavily, giving it too much nitrogen can be stressful also. And irrigation. Too little water or drought stress is bad for lawns, but too much water can be just as bad of a problem. Many times, take-all root rot will start to become a major problem in St. Augustine lawns in the fall after a long, rainy, wet summer. The extra moisture really helps to induce the disease, and if you add in cutting it too short and fertilizing it too much, bam, you're going to have a bad outbreak of it, and it's going to take out large sections of your lawn. We can diagnose this. We can actually put it under our microscope in the office and see the fungal hyphae in it. You have to know exactly what you're looking for, but we're going to cover that in class to show you exactly what this disease looks like under a microscope. I believe that's it for part 2 of Turfgrass. We have one more section to go through, and as always, if you have any questions about this or any other presentations, please feel free to contact me and ask.